Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Matt Connor, Chief Information Security Officer at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Matt, thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So Matt, just to begin with, I wanted to ask you a little bit about cybersecurity in general. What is the NGA's approach to cybersecurity and how are you sort of formulating your strategy around that?
Well, I hope we're not doing anything too innovative because we do sort of have a whole of NGA perspective on cyber that emphasizes early and frequent engagement with the cybersecurity program from our programs, from our developers. So in that sense, we're sort of living the build it in, don't bolt it on kind of ethos. I suspect, like most other organizations like us, we're trying to invest even more in automation, in maturing our cybersecurity program, in looking for tomorrow's cybersecurity talent. It's hard to say we're doing anything tremendously unique, except that our culture does prompt us to push further to the outside than many of our IC partners. So we are definitely more engaged on the unclassified networks than the other IC agencies, given our statutory missions to provide safety of navigation products for mariners and pilots around the world. So that culture pushes us to take a little bit more risk, to push pretty far forward, and to learn from that quickly.
Yeah, how do you balance that? I mean, something like the NRO, they're very internal, they're very classified. You guys, you work a lot with maps, you work with GPS and things like that, which are more toward the outside. So, how are you working with classified networks and how are you working with the unclass?
Well, I think like everybody else, we were largely on the classified networks prior to the pandemic, and we did a huge pivot to get down to the low side. At the beginning of the pandemic, our average teleworkers was about 300, and at the peak of the pandemic, we were well over 10,000. And so we increased capacity by 30x, for example, just to sort of support our workforce heading home and being safe. There was a period within our building when we were less than 10% occupancy from our normal highs. It's only recently that the low side has become our primary. We definitely have classified sensors, we have classified products, we have classified analytics. The majority of our workforce is active largely on classified networks. And so, so the move to unclass has been relatively recent, except for those, again, statutory missions that we've had for a long, long time. But even the production of many of those products takes place on the high side and it's moved low, which creates an incredible demand for cross-domain services. From a cybersecurity perspective, you probably recognize that cross-domain services are our riskiest systems for their ability to bridge unclassified and classified networks. So they get the most rigor, the most testing, the most governance to protect us from that risk.
That must have been a pretty empty building. I remember, I think when I went there, you can fit the Statue of Liberty in the atrium or something like that, right?
That is true, yes. And other fun fact, if you'll get on the nickel tour, is if you recall, the top of the building that sort of looks like Hogwarts, where you can see the weather and the rain and those kinds of things. Those roof panels were all made of the same material that the Chinese Bird's Nest Olympic Stadium was made out of. So
Wow.
They actually they're part of the climate system in the building. They give a little bit, they contract a little bit. It's a pretty impressive facility and one of the only LEED platinum buildings in terms of environmental impact in the DC metro area.
Very cool. So getting back to cybersecurity, a lot of things need to be centralized. You need to have, a lot of rapid capabilities to bring, to hit these sorts of hackers when they're trying to get in or any sorts of cyber malware and things like that. How are you staying centralized? How are you kind of pushing out the stoppage when you need to, that sort of thing?
So we have a cybersecurity operations center with a full complement 24/7, as you'd expect. One of the most important aspects of our cybersecurity operations center, or CSOC, is that it's both located with and in alignment with the NGA Ops Center, which sort of emphasizes that cybersecurity is another mission imperative. We have tight integration with a cybersecurity watch officer who informs leadership of critical issues when they need to through an escalation pattern. So I think that's one of the hallmarks of our cybersecurity program is it's a mission imperative. Otherwise, the CSOC, to be effective, they collect telemetry from all systems on all networks. Most of the time, they're moving that stuff up to the classified network where we can fuse it all together. But it's just one of those things that, we used to joke that cybersecurity is like air and water. It's not optional. And so for the CSOC to be able to actively monitor and defend, all roads need to lead there. So we have data collection agents, data aggregation agents, and increasingly we're moving to automated parsing of that cybersecurity telemetry, given that essentially no human can keep up with the speed of alerts.
Well, you definitely picked exactly where I'm going next, which is, how does automation fit into that? Because clearly your attack surface is large. There's a lot of people trying to get into the United States government, especially in an intelligence agency. So, what kind of automation are you bringing in? What are you sort of looking at in sort of the research or going forward in the future, that kind of stuff?
Right. Well, one of our big efforts right now is fusion with the CSOC with our data core. So a few years ago, in order to meet the future demand of NGA's data, we collect and ingest just countless terabytes or petabytes of data, that we have a data core where NGA deliberately invested in people who are data literate, data scientists, those kinds of things. We have a chief data scientist. And so what they do is they consult on various projects across the agency. And the one that I'm very proud of is work being led out of our CSOC in partnership with our data core. And it's everything you hope it would be, or it certainly is for me, in the sense of applying advanced analytics, AI and ML, and not in the buzzword sense so we can say that we have some of that, but truly trying to take the signal from the noise, or more accurately, take the needle in the needle stack. We're collecting hundreds of millions of events and parsing that for anomalous behavior. That's the kind of stuff that computers do well. And so we're building big data lakes full of cybersecurity telemetry. We're doing that in multiple platforms, and we're visualizing that stuff, trending that stuff. We're applying advanced data science to it. And so I'm excited about that work. That's not the only place where we're applying AI and ML. Of course, I've sort of focused on the cyber network defense environment, but really, there's not much at NGA that isn't data driven, whether it's the products that we ingest, the products that we create, or even just day-to-day business in our shop. We're using data and analytics to continuous monitoring. So changes in operational risk throughout the life cycle after an authorization decision is yielded. We're using data to manage our workforce, where we're looking at key metrics and indicators like retention times and recruiting for people. Some of the more basic metrics are things like compliance with 8570 regulations to make sure that people have appropriate certifications commensurate with their responsibilities. But really, everything's data, right? Whether or not people know it. And so, from my perspective, when I speak to either my workforce or the workforce of tomorrow, it's data. And data is a key part underpinning some of the NGA's biggest initiatives that the director has been talking about with the workforce, and actually will soon release to the public. Some of these key initiatives, they're all built on data.
And I think AI, for some people at this point is, like you said, a buzzword. Not everyone can really grasp what this sort of issue is or what this technology is. Can you tell us if there's any sort of payoffs that you're getting at this point, or is it still kind of a nascent technology that you're kind of getting your arms around?
Well, I can obviously speak from a cybersecurity perspective, but I should also offer a perspective from the agency. So from a cybersecurity perspective, absolutely. We're seeing the detection of anomalous behavior that only become clear when you trend large data sets over time. And that's allowed us to ferret out things for exploration. Doesn't necessarily mean, we're finding previously undocumented penetrations. That would be very troubling, but a valuable outcome from AI ML. But truly, it's allowing us to look at things like misconfigurations, things that beacons that are chiming away, or systems that are reporting misconfiguration that they're just lost in the noise. And so we've seen value in network cleanup. We've seen value in rogue asset detection. Shadow IT is a very real problem. While we certainly have strong governance mechanisms, every once in a while we'll find something that shouldn't be where it is, and for reasons. And so things like cybersecurity analysis through AI ML, that's the kind of stuff that they do well. They pick those kinds of things out of the noise. Additionally, I would say that from an agency perspective, we certainly do have a AAA initiative, which is automation, augmentation, artificial intelligence. And so we're applying AI ML to NGA's challenge space, including GeoInt. And so we actually have a named senior who leads that activity, orchestrating AI ML projects across the agency. Our former director said a year and change ago that we would need 6 million analysts to parse all the data that NGA has. We don't have 6 million analysts. And so we're applying AI ML just to help us, with our day job, which is delivering GeoInt.
And when it comes to cybersecurity, obviously having AI do that sort of dumb work that, you don't need to waste humans' time on is very valuable. Do you see AI going up into these higher echelons and doing work that maybe a very advanced analyst would do? Or for a while or the foreseeable future, it's going to stay in that, area where we can really trust it?
Okay, you raised an interesting dimension there with trust, which we can get to in a moment. I do think near term, we're sort of working on basic blocking and tackling and reducing the tier 1, tier 2 workload so that they can spend more time making decisions, which is what humans do well, rather than just sort of responding to sensors and those kinds of things. So we're looking to combine that type of power, AI, ML, with orchestration and automation, where a certain set of behaviors would drive us courses of action that the basic blocking and shunning, for example, of a suspect connection could be done in an automated fashion. And I think from a trust perspective, we're certainly building that with our training data and our models. But I think there's a shady dimension of trust with respect to AI ML that we're also thinking of, and this is for the whole of agency perspective, which is sort of the what's commonly referred to as the deep fake problem. But bottom line is, your models are only as good as your training data. Your algorithms are only as good as your models. And so we are very conscious of counter AI threats out there. We haven't moved out on specific technology selections, but we are definitely tracking that issue. It's hard to see when the time horizon of operational fakes, those kinds of things would start to impact our business. But we're definitely tracking that issue. And so we've engaged our federally funded research and development contractors, among others, to help us with that pretty hard problem.
Right, because at some point it really gets to an arms race where AI learns to mitigate a risk, and then the opposite AI learns to go past and thwart that mitigation, and then it just keeps going on forever.
Right. Well, everything old is new again, right? And right. Everything goes in a cycle, right? So that's the endless battle between, pirates and Coast Guard and everybody else, right? We're just all constantly going to be in that cycle. It's just the new technology. The same could be said of quantum resistant crypto, right? Trying to figure out when to deploy quantum resistant crypto, which is now, but looking ahead at a future where quantum computing changes everything, and that's just going to be an arms race. It's going to be an escalation.
And while we're on sort of the buzzy word type things, zero trust, a lot of people are thinking about right now. Is that something that you're implementing already, or are you putting it into practice?
Yep. So I got bingo. So, absolutely. So zero trust. So if you ask 5 cybersecurity professionals about their views on zero trust, I would argue that you'd get 7 different answers. Right? Mm-hmm. It sort of means everything and therefore nothing.
Right.
And we spend a lot of time with, again, FFRDCs and or market analysts trying to separate wheat from the chaff. The basic principles of mutual authentication, I think, are true no matter what definition you apply. And so we're absolutely designing that into our service-centered architecture, and absolutely designing that into our future operating environment, which is the IT of the future that will underpin our new facility in St. Louis, as well as our pivot for our future architecture here in the East. So zero trust has to be part of that. We're plugged in with multiple pilot activities and multiple working groups defining those standards for the IC and the DoD, of which we're a member of both. And so right now we're definitely looking at where do we implement zero trust? What does that mean to us? Where are there technology solutions that fill gaps, and where are we taking advantage of existing services like strong authentication via a strong identity access management and authentication service?
Great. Well, we're going to take a quick break. My guest today is Matt Connor. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni, on the discussion, Keeping Cyber Systems Safe in Defense, sponsored by Micro Focus Government Solutions on Federal News Network.